Now, I'm sure we can all agree when it comes to West Ham, it is never dull. There's always some drama, there's a story to be written, whether it's the owners, the stadium, or all the managerial changes that they want or don't want, they're happy with all of a sudden. They've won a European trophy, they get to another European semi-final, but in the league it was very much, a bit of a flat tyre season for West Ham last year. So David Moyes doesn't renew his contract, doesn't extend with the club, and they appoint Julien Lopetegui, which I think a lot of West Ham fans overall are happy to see David Moyes go. He's a very divisive manager for a lot of fans. It's a kind of Marmite situation overall. And for, Lopetegui does have the minerals, does have the credentials to really get West Ham into the situation that they want to be in, which is kind of where they were, but with some better players and maybe playing a little bit better football. But from what I've seen of Lopetegui over his managerial career, this might be a little bit of out of the frying pan and into the fire for West Ham in terms of the style of play that they think they might be getting and all the rest of it. So I've been kind of waiting with bated breath for some transfer business, some real transfer business to actually develop there with West Ham, so we can see, what are they going to be spending? What is the manager going to try and build there? Who might also be leaving? Because with some high-profile names on the books as well, you've got to imagine one of them moves on in the summer. And West Ham look to be signing, I'm even going to try his first name, Mazraoui from Bayern Munich. And this is a player that I've got a good handle on already from his time at Ajax and Bayern. And I think this is a good signifier for West Ham, and this might be the first domino that drops in a huge sequence of transfers that sees some key players leave and then maybe fund the incoming transfers that they've been linked to around, European and world football as now. In the video today, we'll be having a look at West Ham, where they're at the moment with the incoming transfer of Mazraoui, maybe John Duran as well. Bids are accepted and rejected. Maybe there's a player swap on the go as well as a few other ones that have been making the headlines, and seeing, how will Lopetegui actually have West Ham shaped out for this year, and what are they missing between now and kickoff? What sort of players should we see them linked to, and who are they in desperate need of, and obviously who's likely to leave at any point in the video today. If you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this as we cover all the big movers and shakers across the European and world transfer window throughout the summer of 2024 as we prepare for a massive season on the channel for the 24-25 season. And get into the comment section in this one and let me know, number one, if I've missed something or got something wrong in the video, feel free to correct me in the comment sections. I'm not that up on West Ham with some situations, maybe I misspeak. But number two, let me know if you are a West Ham fan or West Ham inclined, if you could bring one more player into the squad, who would it be and why? Thoughts on Lopetegui welcome as well, of course. And let's just get stuck straight into it. Now, at that point in recording, West Ham have only played 2 pre-season games, and you know what it's like at this stage of pre-season. There's a lot of academy kids in there. There's a lot of 45-minute substitutions. You don't really get much of a sense of, maybe who are the runners and riders, the forerunners in pre-season until they start playing, some proper opposition. They may still see the same patterns in the game or whatever, but, once you start playing teams that aren't in like League 2 and stuff like that, is when you'll start to see a bit of a semblance, a bit of a formation perhaps of what the best 11 will look like. But what we do see and what we will see in this pre-season is a bit of an early formation on the key principles, route to goal, defensive priorities, and build up, the established phases of play that they're going to go through to try and build the game out or press or, whatever it is they're going to do. Now, I've tried my best with the 2 games West Ham have played already to have a look at the highlights and stuff like that. I've obviously not watched the matches to see how Lopetegui's had them shaped up, because the usual websites haven't really been able to show us what formations they've been using. So like I said in the intro, anything that I'm a wee bit left field on, feel free to correct me. And looking at the squad for how it sits right now of the current actual roster of players, some of these guys we've seen featuring in pre-season, some we haven't because they've been away on international duty in a few different places. And I think, I know Kudus has played on the right predominantly, but I think, if no one else was to be signed, this probably wouldn't be too far off the strongest 11. Maybe it's Emerson for Cresswell. I went with Cresswell on this just because he captained the last match, similar to Zuma, who was a captain in pre-season. So again, I don't, maybe I've got the best 11 wrong here. Maybe it is Mavropanos and Kilman. Maybe I would probably have Aguerd. I think Aguerd is really, really good, but I think he is linked to be leaving. So he's somebody that we probably can't think about too much in the West Ham picture. He's probably a player that will become funds, similar to Lucas Paqueta, who's been linked away left, right and centre. But I do think that might give West Ham the ability to hold on to Kudus. They've just brought in Guilherme and Kilman at Wolves. And like I was saying in the intro, I was waiting for some serious business to actually happen, because a centre-back that the manager's familiar with doesn't really touch the sides in terms of piquing my interest or anything like that. And Guilherme is another Brazilian wonder kid. Will we ever see him? You know, I get deja vu these transfers. Like, a good example is like Matthias Frank at Crystal Palace. It just did absolutely nothing. This guy showed up in pre-season, but so maybe there's a little bit more hope for him. Now, Mazraoui is a capable right back and left back. He is right-footed, but this guy can play, really, he's played centre back as well for Bayern Munich. He can really play anywhere in the defensive positions to a certain extent. He's obviously not your ideal centre back, but his recovery speed and, you know, defensive awareness is pretty robust. But his main attributes, his main, you know, USP, as it were, as a professional player is his offensive output, his attacking prowess, his speed, his overlapping potential, and alongside the likes of Guilherme or even Kudus on this side of the pitch here, this is a real strengthening of like an established route to goal as such. Trying to look at the friendlies that West Ham have played so far, I think it's going to go one of two ways. I personally think it's going to be a 4-1-4-1 situation. I'm not too up on all the academy kids, obviously, at West Ham that featured in the friendly to really know that for certain. If it's not a 4-1-4-1 kind of setup, it will depend on who replaces Paqueta, but it might be more of like a 4-2-3-1 with two more kind of defensive midfielders behind a playmaker who can support the forward and the press, as well as attacking wide players that can take their man on and create from the wide areas, as well as having a fullback that can bomb on in Mazraoui. I think, you know, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we seen like Kilman maybe develop into some sort of like quasi left back that tucks in to a back three kind of situation, or even if West Ham did go and play an absolute back five and have like the extra player coming in from, you know, stepping in from defence like Kilman can do. Kilman's done pretty well for Wolves over, you know, his Wolves career certainly. So I think there's a few ways that it might go, but looking at it the way it sits now with the squad and whatever, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't something that resembled like a 4-1-4-1, where maybe this four in this half of the pitch here have a bit more license to go and press on, and then you've got somebody like Alvarez to shield the back line, etc, etc. But what Mazraoui actually provides West Ham here is a genuinely world-class attacking fullback that in the Premier League, because there's no European football this year for West Ham, going weekend to weekend. Also, there's FA Cups and League Cups. I know that kind of stuff as time goes on. Obviously, you've got Kufal here for backup. But this is a guy that will cause a lot of teams a lot of problems, because so many more teams now in the Premier League take up this kind of wacky formation that is kind of relative to the ball or relative to the position of players and that kind of thing. And, you know, it can change from looking like something like this to maybe like a 3-6-1 or something like that, depending on where the ball is, the state of play, and a few other bits and pieces. And players like Mazraoui make that really difficult to keep, you know, cohesive and to keep it coherent, because when you're really throwing extra players into these wide areas, they do just, and I know this is depth players, right, but just imagine this is opposition for a second, they do just magnetize, they do just pull people out to where the ball is. And if there's more and more danger on this side here, and you really don't want these guys getting by you, you definitely don't want them delivering balls into the box, then more and more players come over to try and crowd that out, which subsequently gives you more space for other players to maybe go in and find some space to play in and go create goals and assists and that kind of thing. And that's something that West Ham were really lacking last year. The couple of times I caught West Ham, you know, it was very much, you know, it was David Moyes football, which would be different, kind of different to Lopetegui. I don't think it's going to be too different in the sense of it's going to start with being defensively sound, number one, which Mazraoui, you know, when you're looking at attacking world-class fullbacks, so many of them have the deficiency of, oh, they're not that great at defending, you know, necessarily. Maybe they can track back, that's no problem, but actually like 1v1 versus a winger, they're not going to give you absolute comfort that they're going to win more than they lose. But Mazraoui's definitely a guy that has the minerals to do that in the Premier League for you, no two ways about it. And then from being defensively robust, you've got your arrowhead attacker, which could be Bowen, I think, under somebody like Lopetegui. I know he's going to try and sign a striker, we'll talk about in a second. We see Danny Ings off the bench and stuff like that. Antonio probably got most of these minutes up here last year, with Bowen being wide, of course, before the arrival of Guilherme. But that arrowhead forward is the focal point for then when, you know, you can come out of your defensive half, your defensive quarter or whatever. That's the guy you look to play to, and then from there it's pace and it's 1-2 touch stuff, it's quick decisions, it's get into the box quickly, make something happen, and make sure there's enough support up there so that, you know, we can't be countered on, you know, quick turnovers and that kind of thing. So absolute like textbook how it's written down style of play. I don't think there's going to be much of a development here. But what Mazraoui 100% gives you is a very clear, very distinct, and very hard to defend against extra attacking outlet to come from back to front very, very quickly. Travel with the ball, take a man out, play an incisive pass into space, into the middle of the pitch. Honestly, this is a guy that, and I know I'm kind of highlighting this again, West Ham are not in European football this year, but this is a guy that is a Champions League level player, and he really does complement the likes of Paqueta if he was to stay, although unlikely, Kudus and whatever, and it would really help West Ham move into this zone that they're moving into of being like a European, you know, don't want to say power, but kind of team, you know. And the other transfer that's kind of coming off the back of this, or it might be depending on bids being accepted and rejected and whatever, is John Duran. Now, if John Duran comes in to be the number one striker, then I think this will be football that will frustrate West Ham fans even more than David Moyes, right? But I am of the opinion right now that he's probably their primary backup option, a guy that they want to bring in for a different style of game, you know, depends on the opponent they're playing. They're number two, so if the number one's injured, they're happy to run with him. Or, you know, a guy that, again, you can just throw the kitchen sink with, take a defender off, put him on, get him up there and, you know, just shell balls in. But if he is the number one target man to be, then I think you're going to see maybe like a 5-4-1 from Lopetegui or something like that. Obviously not with Alvarez, but with somebody else. And if they are to sign John Duran for over 30 million quid, a guy that was decent for West Ham, Aston Villa, I beg your pardon, last year, but, you know, obviously Watkins is absolutely brilliant, but it didn't ever really show that he was that good to even feasibly, like if Watkins was injured, I think Aston Villa fans would have been biting their nails at that. So I've got to think that he's coming in as a number two, because I can't believe that they would want to bring a guy like that in to really lead the attack, to spearhead the attack for the full season as a number one striker. And I think as soon as we see Lucas Paqueta move on, we'll probably see some more Mazraoui level dominoes probably fall for West Ham, because West Ham want to get back into European football this season and are not hiding their ambition in that sense, in terms of appointing the manager, bringing in a guy like Mazraoui, maybe spending 30 million on a backup striker. So the dominoes that might fall for West Ham, the main links that I've seen knocking about, could be N'Golo Kante coming into midfield, which, you know, I think is only going to level them up. And in theory, like, this guy just wins everything. So if they did get Kante, who's just like two players, obviously, even at the age that he's at, maybe he's like a player and a half now, you know, he's maybe not quite the full prime Kante anymore. Again, he's not offensively minded, but if you see him for France, you see, in general, it's quite understated that he does get into these types of zones. And although he's not an assist maker, you know, he's a guy that will play the winger in. He'll set the ball into space for someone. He is present all over the pitch. But I would like to see West Ham bring in a more attacking style player into this position. It feels like he's on his way to Barcelona, or a team that is in the Champions League, certainly. But I think that the ideal person you would want to come into West Ham in this type of shape, if it is 4-1-4-1 and trying to be somewhat attacking, would be like Dani Olmo. But I think if you could get N'Golo Kante into this team alongside Alvarez, I don't know what you'd do with James Ward-Prowse, but is he good enough to be like the key playmaker all season long? But there is some reports going around that it could be Ivan Toney that they would look to bring in as being their number one forward. And I think if they could get Toney, I think they'll absolutely do it. But again, I don't know if this is a guy that could play alongside John Duran, if you're going to take James Ward-Prowse out of the picture here, and you're looking at Alvarez, Kante, and some sort of 4-4-2 type of rig out. But Ivan Toney feels like of the level where he could score for this West Ham team over 20 goals in the league, and it would propel them into a very high position in the table if they can keep the goals conceded down. And they had a midfield and the wide attacking areas stocked out with these types of players, with no European football to contend with. And like I say, with this, the main thing is everyone else above them probably has that to deal with, so it might just play into their hands a little bit more. But Toney will cost a lot of money. There's no two ways about it. Brentford are holding out for a king's ransom, and I think they're going to try their damnedest to get as much of it as they think they can get. And for West Ham to get anywhere near that, it is going to require like Paqueta going out. Again, with Flamengo being linked, how much money are they actually going to get for him? Might be the wages coming off the books maybe helps with it. This West Ham team, like if Kante and Toney come into it alongside Duran, there's a lot of youth players here, and I thought, like, let's just put them on the tactics board anyway, because it's not going to be long before they're all worth like 22, 25 million in some sort of transfer. So this Orford has been offered to Aston Villa, to what I can see on Twitter, to the disappointment of West Ham fans, and the John Duran deals that are being rejected and stuff like that. So maybe he won't be around. He's said to be an attacking midfielder. Andy Irvin obviously did his loan stint last year at Austria, and this guy Erfe has been playing as well, and Marshall. So if we just take them out, just to clean it up a little bit, there's a huge vacancy in this West Ham midfield. Maybe one or two of those players we've just deleted will come in, will rise into the ranks of the senior team and be worthy first team players, which is brilliant. Maybe some of them will be used as a wee bit of horse trade and a wee bit of transfer market fodder, as it were. But I think if, these are the sort of deals that they're looking to get done, Kante and Toney, it will leave a big gap in the central creation of the team. Who is going to unlock the door for these wide wingers and build up play or counter attack? Who is the guy that's going to be in support of the striker and make sure that they've got service and a partner to help any sort of press, or if they're going to be counter attacking, someone that can help them in the counter attack go further and beyond if they're holding the ball up and play them in. So I think this is still a big problem. This is still a big question mark for West Ham. I don't think Kante helps that problem, if anything, because I do think, like, if you're going to do a two-man, a double pivot, you know, a 4-2-3-1 kind of shape and attack, if you just let these guys go forth and press and attack and you cover with Alvarez and somebody else, I think James Ward-Prowse could do that job good enough. And obviously, you know, all the positives that you get with Ward-Prowse, so him being accompanied by the butcher, the absolute tackler that is Alvarez, then that's a base that can work and be developed on if it's got a really strong back four behind it and a good attack. They can take pressure off of it, and when they give those guys the ball, they don't lose it, they go forward, they take yards back, they get the opposition on their heels, and ultimately if they create chances, they score them, and again, you know, relieve pressure on the defence overall, give them time and space to play. So it will be interesting to see, but I think Mazraoui definitely shows that wide areas, crossing the ball in, John Duran, Tony, like foxes in the box. I do think this is going to be probably West Ham's key feature. It might not be a central playmaker type, you know, which I think will be probably to their detriment, because like I tried to mention earlier, maybe got sidetracked a little bit, but when you seen West Ham last year under David Moyes, like Paqueta was having to go in so many different positions to, you know, be effective in that kind of press and be the main playmaker in counter-attacks and get into the box and stuff like that. And Ward-Prowse, if he couldn't, you know, do a Pirlo pass, or he couldn't like unlock the door, it was hard for him because he was really deep. And when you've got like the kind of 4-2-2s that West Ham had last year, there's just hard, you know, there's less passing lanes to hit, essentially, you know. Whereas when you've got wider players, it's just a different picture. You've then got a different kind of networks of passes you can make, different positions players can take up, etc. So I think they would maybe suit him a wee bit more this time around. But West Ham really did struggle with having a guy that could go on the dribble in that sense, you know, really transition from back to front. Mazraoui can definitely do that as a fullback, but you need a Paqueta replacement, like a proper guy in the middle that can do that job as well. Just the way the Premier League goes, the style of football and everything else. And if you get Tony, you've got 20 plus goals in your locker, and I think that could be a really big year for West Ham. So looking forward to seeing how it does shake out for them. But I think the departures are really going to shape things, because if it was to be like a Kudus that goes for the big money, you know, Paqueta, it's a funny situation with the betting thing and Flamengo want him back and whatever. So if Kudus gets sold for big money, then it puts a lot of pressure on West Ham to not just replace him, but Paqueta, and firm out this kind of middle section of the pitch here, because it's just big Tam Soucek otherwise with those younger players that we've just taken off screen. And don't forget, Lopetegui walked out on the Wolves job at the beginning of last season because they weren't going to be spending money, they weren't going to be going into the market. So this is a guy that takes jobs on the basis of getting transfer business done that will help reinforce the style of play he's been brought in to implement. So I do have a good bit of confidence that West Ham will make more moves, will make some significant moves as well in this summer. And it will be really interesting to see how strong they come out of it and really how good of a season can they do, you know, building on the position. Top half of the table again last year, you know, nothing to be that ashamed about despite not getting into Europe again. But, you know, they're in a position of strength here to a good extent, and they really should be going forth and getting stronger. And like I said just there, I do worry about who the departures are, and let's see who the incomings are. But by all accounts, West Ham could be a big threat to a lot of teams this year if they get the business right. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Don't forget to drop a comment down below on screen and now with some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Stay out of trouble, and I will catch you on the next one.